can I ask you something? Why are you so angry? I'm not even exempted in this conversation. Why are we so angry? Like, what are we really fighting and who are we fighting? Because I've been watching, I've been listening, and sometimes I sit down and ask myself, are we actually empowered or we are just tired? Like, tired of being misunderstood, tired of being limited, tired of being told what to do. And you know what? I get it. But here is my question to us today. At what point did strength start looking like hardness? When did we decide that to become powerful, we must be defensive? Because if I'm to be honest with you in this conversation, some of us are not just strong, but we are guided in this matter. We are not just confident, but we are aggressive in tackling the whole issue. And we call that growth. But it is, to me, it is not. So let's go back to the beginning. When God was creating woman, He wasn't confused. He wasn't trying to experiment anything. He wasn't trying to fix a mistake. God was intentional. God was intentional about creating somebody special. He was intentional about creating an helper. So, if God was intentional about creating us, why are we moving like we need to redesign ourselves to feel valuable? Let me tell you something. You don't need to outdo a man to matter. You don't need to silence a man to be heard. You don't need to become cold to be respected. And in all of this, you don't need to shrink. I take that again. You don't need to outdo a man to matter. You don't need to silence a man to be heard. You don't need to become cold to be respected. And in all of this, you don't need to shrink. That is the balance nobody is talking about. In the Bible, God doesn't show me a weak woman. Proverbs 31, that woman was doing business. As she was doing business, she was planning. As she was planning, she was leading her household. As she was leading her household, she was disciplined. As she was disciplined, she was accountable. That is, she was submitted to someone. And that's the balance nobody is talking about. In the Bible, God doesn't show me a weak woman. Proverbs 31, that woman was doing business. As she was doing business, she was planning. As she was planning, she was leading her household. As she was leading her household, she was productive. As she was productive, she was disciplined. Meaning, our strength had boundaries. Our confidence had submission. And our influence, you see, had accountability. She was accountable to someone. And I think that is where we are missing it. We are trying to define ourselves outside of the one who created us. Now look at it. Everything now feels like a fight. But you see, when you know who you are in God, you don't need to outdo a man. You don't need to start looking for battle to fight. You don't need to rewrite what God has established, what God has orchestrated. Because identity that is settled does not need panic. This is not me dismissing your intelligence. This is not me dismissing real issues. This is not me pretending that women have not been overlooked or oppressed. But here is the tension. If the solution to imbalance is rebellion against design, then we have not healed. We have just reacted. And reaction, you see, does not bear revelation. does not birth purpose. You can advocate for justice. You can speak against abuse. You can demand dignity. But once advocacy turns into hostility against God's structure, we need to pause. Like, pause about everything. Because the same God who called you valuable, who said he's intentional about making you, who called you an helper, also established order. He did not establish order to silence you. He did not establish order to bench you, but he established order to protect purpose. So, if the version of your empowerment requires you to resent men, reject accountability, or resist divine structure, then I have to ask you this. Who taught you that kind of freedom? And who taught you that freedom looks like that? Because the freedom I know in Christ is clarity. Take this from me today. You don't have to fight your design to be powerful. You don't have to erase your differences to feel equal. And you don't have to add in your arts to be powerful. You can be bold and still be submitted to God. You can be intelligent and still be humble. And in fact, you can even be influential and still honor divine order. I call it divine order. That is not weakness. That is maturity. And maybe that is the real conversation we need to talk about. Not whether woman should rise, but how we rise and who we are becoming while we rise. Because if at the end of all of this, you gain a platform but lose alignment, you gain a voice but lose disobedience, and in fact, you even gain applause but lose peace, then what are you really building? What are you really building when you gain all of that and lose alignment? You lose disobedience. You even lost your peace. What are you really building? That is what I'm asking you to consider. Please reconsider that. Thank you. Bye.